My fiance forgot to end the call, and I overheard a heartbreaking conversation with his family that My fiance forgot to end the call, and I overheard a devastating conversation with his family that shattered everything I believed about our relationship just hours before our wedding. I am a 26-year-old woman who was supposed to get married last week, but instead, I packed my things and ran away the night before. This is the story of how my seemingly perfect life unraveled in one evening. I had been in a relationship with my fiancé, a 26-year-old man, for 3 years. We got engaged 6 months ago, and we also have 2 beautiful boys together, twin toddlers who are just 1 year old. To be completely honest, our kids were unplanned. My boyfriend didn't want me to have them when I first found out I was pregnant. In fact, he was strongly against it, and it almost drove us apart. I remember that time vividly. He wanted me to terminate the pregnancy, and I stood my ground. I told him flat out that I was keeping the babies, with or without him. I even gave him the option to leave and assured him I wouldn't demand child support. I had faith in myself. I believed I was capable of raising my children alone. I have always had a strong maternal instinct, and to me, the timing felt right. Maybe it wasn't ideal, but I was ready to be a mother. When I told him all this, he asked for time to think. I made it clear that my decision was final, and if he couldn't accept it, I would walk away. Eventually, he came around. At least, that's what I thought. He apologized, promised to support me, and stayed by my side throughout the pregnancy. He even became the supportive partner I needed. He helped me through my cravings, comforted me during the difficult moments, and was there for every doctor's appointment. By the time our boys were born, he seemed like a different person, a proud father who was happy to have a family. When we found out we were having twins, it was overwhelming. I'll admit, I don't think I could have handled it all by myself, so I was grateful he chose to stay. He was a good dad, he changed diapers, rocked the boys to sleep, and even took turns waking up at night to soothe them. 6 months after our sons were born, he proposed to me. I said yes, partly because I had forgiven him for how things started, and partly because I believed we had both grown as people. We had been through so much together already. After 3 years of dating, a pregnancy, and the arrival of our twins, marriage felt like the natural next step. The months leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of planning, excitement, and joy. My parents adored him and were over the moon about the wedding. They had always seen him as the perfect son-in-law, a hardworking, reliable man who had stepped up when it mattered most. I thought so too. He had become everything I hoped for in a partner, and I was genuinely happy.
But the night before the wedding changed everything.
We decided to spend the night apart, as is customary for some couples. I stayed at our home while he stayed at his parents' house just a few blocks away. That evening, he called me. He told me he loved me, that he couldn't wait to marry me, and that he was excited to start the rest of our lives together. His words made me emotional, and we shared a sweet moment on the phone. After saying our goodbyes, I waited for him to hang up, but he didn't. At first, I thought it was just a mistake. He has this habit of not pressing the screen hard enough to end calls, so I stayed on the line for a moment. That's when I heard his father's voice in the background asking if he had just been talking to me. Curiosity got the better of me, so I stayed quiet and listened. What followed was a conversation that still echoes in my mind, even now. His father asked him if he still felt the same way he had 2 days ago. My fiancé hesitated before answering, but when he did, his voice sounded heavy with regret. He said, "Yes." My heart sank, but I couldn't hang up. His mother joined the conversation next, urging him to go through with the wedding regardless of how he felt. She said he needed to grow up and be responsible now that he was a father. She even called it bad enough that we had children out of wedlock, but getting married would at least make it right. Then his father spoke again. "We can't force you to marry someone you don't love," he said. "But if you don't, you're out of the will." My fiancé pushed back, saying he wouldn't be manipulated, but his mother kept pressing. She reminded him that having children meant stepping up and doing the right thing. "If you were ready to have kids," she said, "you're ready to get married." I don't know what hurt more, the fact that he admitted he didn't love me, or the fact that he was only marrying me because of external pressure. I stayed on the line long enough to hear him sigh and say, "Fine, I'll do it." So here's what happened. His mother said it, and his dad agreed. They were both on the same page, pressuring him into something he clearly wasn't ready for. My ex, on the other hand, was sitting there acting like a victim. He started this whole rant about how unfair everyone was being to him. He said he was being coerced into marrying me, even though he wasn't ready for it, just so he wouldn't be cut out of their will. Yeah, you read that right. The man was literally more worried about his inheritance than anything else. He kept going, complaining about how no one in his life ever stops to consider if he's ready for the things they push onto him. According to him, he's always being shoved into milestones he's not prepared for. Fatherhood, marriage, you name it. At this point, I honestly didn't care whether he was ready to be a father or not. His parents didn't either. They forced him to stay with me when I found out I was pregnant, even though the thought of having kids apparently terrified him. And now here they were, pressuring him to marry me because, God forbid, their son's life doesn't follow the exact script they wrote for him. He kept whining about how unfair we all were, and then, classic drama king move, he stormed out of the room, leaving his phone behind. His parents, meanwhile, didn't skip a beat. They just sat there, continuing to talk about how irresponsible he was and how he needed to grow up. That's when I hung up. I sat there stunned, staring at the wall, trying to process everything. The man I thought I knew, the one who'd been a decent boyfriend and a good dad for the past year, had only stayed with me because his parents threatened to disinherit him. And I found out all of this the night before our wedding. What a time to be alive. For a couple of minutes, I just sat there, unable to make sense of it. Sure, we'd had arguments when I first told him I was pregnant, but after that, he'd seemed to step up, or so I thought. Turns out, he was just really good at pretending, Oscar-worthy, honestly. Once I managed to stop my head from spinning, I knew I couldn't go through with it, so I packed up my stuff, grabbed my kids, and drove to a hotel on the outskirts of town. It was late when we got there, and the kids were cranky, so I put them to bed, blocked my ex and his entire family on every platform I could think of, and just sat there. I cried all night, like full-on ugly crying. By the time I finally fell asleep, it was around 4 a.m. I was emotionally drained, but at least I had some clarity. The wedding venue and everything else had been paid for by his parents, and since they were loaded, I didn't feel bad about the money that was going to waste. It was their idea, after all. Let them deal with the fallout. Before I went to sleep, I texted all my friends and family, letting them know the wedding was off. I didn't go into details, just told them I'd explain later. I also made it very clear that I didn't want anyone reaching out to my ex or his family. Thankfully, my people had my back and respected my wishes. The next day, I stayed in the hotel. I ate my feelings and played with my kids, trying to focus on them because they were the only ones who mattered. I was heartbroken, sure, but I had to keep it together for them. The day after that, I decided to go back home to grab my stuff and move out. I dropped the kids off at my parents' place first, then headed to the house. When I got there, my ex was waiting for me. He looked like he hadn't slept, his face all pale and panicky. He started asking where I'd been, saying he was worried sick. Then, without even letting me respond, he launched into a tirade about how humiliated he and his family were. Apparently, they'd waited for hours at the wedding venue, expecting me to show up. He said I owed them all an explanation and a public apology. Cold feet, according to him, was not an excuse to humiliate his family like that. I didn't bother arguing. I just told him I'd overheard his conversation with his parents. For a moment, he looked confused, then it clicked and he had the decency to look ashamed. That was it for me. I went inside, grabbed the essentials, and left without another word. I didn't feel the need to explain myself. He'd done what he thought was right, and now I was doing what I thought was right. I wasn't interested in being his wife anymore. I just wanted to focus on being a good mother. That was a week ago. I thought it was over, but today he showed up at my parents' house begging to talk to me. My parents, who now know everything, didn't want to let him in, but I agreed to talk to him one last time. We stayed outside so we wouldn't wake the kids. He apologized for everything, said he really does love me and the kids, and that he wants to be a part of our lives. He claimed he wants to work things out without his parents interfering. I told him I'd think about it. Honestly, I don't know if I can trust him again. I want my kids to have a relationship with their dad, but for now, I need a break. This week has been insane, and I need time to figure out what's best for me and my kids. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. What would you do? Update 1. I know it has been a while since I last updated you, but life has been absolutely chaotic lately. Between managing work, taking care of the kids, and navigating the massive undertaking of moving out, I just have not had the time or mental energy to sit down and write this. But I finally carved out a moment, and I want to say that the support I have received has been nothing short of overwhelming. I genuinely cannot thank you all enough for the love, kindness, and advice that so many of you have shared. It has meant the world to me, and I truly appreciate every word of encouragement. To get straight to it, yes, I have spoken to a lawyer about the custody arrangements. I have decided to pursue full custody of my kids because after much reflection, I know now that I cannot get back together with my ex. That chapter of my life is closed. However, I want to address something. After my last post, I started getting hateful messages from a few people accusing me of being selfish or a bad mother for even considering reconciliation. Honestly, those comments were so out of line. I am a mother, yes, but I am also a human being with emotions and vulnerabilities. Only a week had passed since that fateful phone call when I was still reeling from the emotional weight of a 3-year relationship. 3 years, for the love of God. Of course, I had not fully moved on yet. I was hurting, and I let my emotions get the better of me when I briefly considered giving him another chance. But here is where I stand now. I am feeling much more grounded and stable. I have had time to reflect and realize that my priority needs to be myself and my kids. There is no going back for me. No matter how much I loved him in the past or how emotional I felt at the time, I have to do what is best for my children and me. That means moving forward without him. The hateful comments were unnecessary and cruel, but I suppose that is just the nature of the internet. People feel entitled to judge without knowing the full story. I should have expected it, but it still stings. Anyway, as I mentioned, I started looking for a lawyer 2 days after calling off the wedding. It took me some time to find someone I felt comfortable with and could trust completely. My ex and I had never discussed custody arrangements before because, honestly, neither of us ever imagined we would end up here. But now that we are officially done, it is time to take the necessary legal steps to ensure that my children stay with me. I do not believe my ex would even try to take them away, but I cannot say the same about his parents. They are very traditional and have a rigid conservative mindset about family and custody. I am almost certain they would not be okay with their son not having custody of his children, and I fully expect them to try and challenge me on it. I am preparing myself for that battle because I know it might be coming. As for my ex, the last time we spoke was 3 days ago, and since then, there has been no contact. That silence speaks volumes. It confirms what I already suspected. No matter what he says about wanting to make things work, his actions show that he is not ready to change or be the partner I need. If he truly cared, he would have checked in on me, at least once, but he hasn't. His words about wanting to make things work now feel hollow and meaningless. This lack of effort from his side reassures me that I am making the right decision. There is no trust left between us, and I cannot stay with someone who does not value me enough to put in the effort. This is what is best for me and my kids, and I know that. I plan to tell him my decision soon, and I just hope that he takes it well and does not cause a scene about the custody arrangement. That is the last thing I need to deal with right now, but I am prepared for it if it comes to that. Thank you all again for your support. It means everything to me. I will keep you updated as things progress. Update 2. I do not want to get back together with him, and I also mentioned that I am planning to file for full custody of our kids. I thought giving him a heads up would be the respectful thing to do. Honestly, I expected him to be fine with it because as far as I knew, he had already admitted he was not ready for marriage or fatherhood. It seemed logical to me that he would feel relieved, maybe even grateful, that I was not forcing him into something he had repeatedly said he was not prepared for. But oh boy, was I wrong. Instead of understanding or agreeing, he completely flipped out. He started arguing with me, saying that I could break up with him if that is what I wanted, but I had no right to take his kids away. At first I thought, okay, maybe this makes sense if we had a functional relationship or if he had shown any interest in being a father. But as you all know, that is not the case here. This is the same man who, for the entire year, had been vocal about not wanting kids. Up until a week ago, he was still saying he was not ready to be a dad. And now, all of a sudden, he is claiming he is ready to fight for custody? Something about this sudden change screamed fishy, and I could not ignore it. I am almost certain his parents are pulling the strings here like they always have. While we were arguing, he started to panic, which was awkward because we were at a restaurant and he was causing a scene. People were staring and I felt humiliated, but I tried to keep my cool and calm him down. After a while, he stopped shouting and I tried to have a rational conversation with him. At this point, I cannot afford to get dragged into a messy custody battle. I do not have the financial means, let alone the emotional bandwidth, to fight it out in court. Meanwhile, his parents could easily afford the best lawyers money can buy, and even if I had the moral high ground, they could still drag this out for years. So my best bet was to reason with him and hope he would back down. I reminded him of his own words, that he was not ready to be a father. I explained that my plan was the best solution for everyone involved. I would take care of the kids, something I genuinely wanted, and he would be free to live his life the way he wanted, unburdened by the responsibilities of fatherhood. I even thought I was doing him a favor. But then he hit me with, I changed my mind, and now I am ready to be a father. Excuse me, what? That statement did not add up at all. How does someone go from not ready for an entire year to ready in just 1 week? I pressed him on it, asking if there was something he was not telling me. And surprise, surprise, he finally admitted the truth. His parents were behind it all. After the wedding was called off and I told him I knew everything, he ran straight to his parents. They told him to fix things with me as soon as possible. Apparently, they had come to terms with the fact that I was not going to marry him, but losing custody of their grandchildren. That was a line they were not willing to let me cross. They even threatened to cut him off financially if he could not convince me to agree to joint custody. By the time he got to this part of the story, he was practically begging me to reconsider and agree to joint custody. But at that point, I was so disgusted, I just walked out. I could not believe he was still dancing to their tune. Here I was, giving him an easy way out of a situation he clearly did not want to be in, and yet he was willing to put up a fight, not because he cared about me or the kids, but because he cared about his parents' money. That was the last straw for me. I do not want him anywhere near our kids. They deserve better than a father who only shows up when his trust fund is on the line. I even decided I do not want child support because I want him completely out of our lives. No ties, no contact, nothing. He clearly lacks the backbone to stand up to his parents, and I refuse to let my children grow up around that kind of influence. It has been a few days since all of this went down, and I have blocked him everywhere. Again. The last message he sent me was truly the cherry on top of this disaster. He suggested we go ahead with joint custody, and in return, he would share his inheritance with me once his parents passed away. Like, seriously? That is the kind of nonsense he thinks would convince me? Looking back, I feel so foolish for ever falling for someone like him. He is the textbook definition of a spoiled brat. I am a self-made woman who worked hard for everything I have, while he has coasted through life on his parents' wealth. I thought dating me had changed him, that he had grown into a better person, but clearly, I was wrong. He is a great actor. I will give him that. He fooled me for 3 whole years. Now, I am done. I am fine with raising my kids on my own because no father is better than one who does not even want to be a father. I know I made the right choice, and I can only hope that he eventually comes to his senses and voluntarily terminates his parental rights. Until then, I am just going to keep praying and doing my best for my kids.
Update 3.
I'm finally back with an update, and this time I actually have some good news to share. I know it has been ages since my last post, and I'm really sorry for going MIA, but life has been an absolute whirlwind lately. There has been so much happening, and I barely had a moment to sit down and gather my thoughts. But now that I do, let me catch you up on everything that's been going on. First of all, the biggest change, my kids and I have officially moved into a new apartment. It's definitely smaller than the house I used to live in with my ex, but honestly, it feels so much better because I can finally call it mine. It's a place that is entirely mine, and my kids, no bad memories, no shared history, no lingering shadows of the past. It's nothing fancy, but it's cozy, and that's all I really need right now. Plus, it's super close to my parents' house, which has been such a blessing. They can drop by to visit or help with the kids whenever they're free, and knowing they're just a short distance away gives me a sense of comfort I didn't realize I was missing. Speaking of help, I also made the decision to hire a full-time nanny. It was not an easy call to make, but realistically, I cannot afford to stop working, and trying to balance everything on my own was just not sustainable. I'm incredibly fortunate that I'm in a position where I can afford this right now, and I know I owe a lot of that to my parents. They have been so supportive, both emotionally and financially, and I honestly do not know where I would be without them. This whole situation has been a curveball none of us saw coming, but they've stepped up in ways I never expected, and I am so grateful for their love and support. Now, on to the part I know a lot of you have been curious about, my ex. So here's the deal. He officially signed away his parental rights. I know, shocking, right? I have no idea what led to this sudden decision. My best guess is that he finally grew a backbone and stood up to his parents, or maybe they just gave up on pressuring him. Either way, it's done, and honestly, I feel nothing but relief about it. One of my friends mentioned that he's moved out of the house he used to live in, which kind of confirms my theory that he's trying to distance himself from his parents' influence. A few days ago, he reached out to me again. He apologized, again, and said he wanted to give me money as compensation. Look, I know what some of you are probably thinking. Take the money, it's for your kids. And trust me, I thought about it. But in the end, I just couldn't. I wasn't joking when I said I wanted nothing more to do with him. I forgave him because holding on to anger wasn't doing me any good. But that doesn't mean I want anything from him. I told him as much in a text. I said I appreciated the gesture but didn't need or want his money, and politely asked him not to contact me again. To his credit, he has respected that boundary so far, and I hope it stays that way. Right now, my focus is entirely on my kids and building the best life I can for them. I don't have the energy to dwell on the past or feel bitter about what happened. All I care about is being a good mom and giving my kids the love and stability they deserve. That's it. It's not always easy, but it's worth it. So, yeah, that's where things stand for now. Life is far from perfect, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm moving in the right direction. Thank you to everyone who has supported me through this journey. It means more to me than I can put into words. I'll try to keep you posted, but for now, just know that we're doing okay.